Welcome everyone to Already Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Tara. We talk about TV shows here. The year is 2021 and the name of the show is Babylon 5. So, full spoilers for the episode, which is Season 2, Episode 9. It is The Coming of Shadows, and this is a biggie. It might possibly be the biggest episode the show's had thus far in terms of really propelling the plot and paying off things that it's been building to and having what might just be some of the very best scenes the show has had up until this point. So, not to oversell it in the opening seconds, but this is a phenomenal episode. Tara, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's pretty big, pretty tragic, actually. Very tragic episode.
It's so tragic.
I think the standout, actually, as much as this is like a tragic episode for Londo, I think the actor who plays G'Kar is like excellent. Like,
he's
really
good. Yeah, he gives these. I mean, when I say this has some of the best scenes of the show so far, I think most of the ones I'm thinking of have got him in it, and it's him and his emotion and his reaction to things. And I think the thing with the tragedy elements of it, right? Because obviously this is very Londo and G'Kar focused as an episode, is that not only is there the tragedy of Londo finally kind of not just going down the dark side, but actively making the choice. Because in this episode, he doesn't have like Morden come to him and say, "Hey, we can do this," and you don't quite know what's going on. He makes the choice to seek out Morden to initiate a thing, knowing full well now what will happen. So that's sad in and of itself, but it does this thing where it takes it and it reminds you afterwards that he might still have some empathy, but he's already made his choice, and it twists the knife. And I'm talking about the scene where G'Kar goes to him and basically extends a hand of friendship, and it's just I don't think I've felt worse in this show, but in a good way, where it was intentional, and I'm supposed to feel absolutely terrible about this.
Yeah.
And then everything that falls out from that as the episode goes on. And I think the fact that the show started, not The Gathering, but the first like regular episode of the show started with a dispute between the Narn and the Centauri over Ragesh 3, I want to say it was the number, but it's been a while, right?
Is that the one where is it Londo's like nephew or something is there?
Yeah. And I just how this is kind of like the same kind of idea, but upped like to like this is an actual war, inciting dispute. This is an actual attack with lots of murder, whereas before there wasn't like this mass death or anything. It was more just there was like a dispute over the control of it and whatever. But yeah, so no, wonderful. And we'll work through things. Yeah, the main plot. There's so many, and it's Sinclair as well. That's not.
Oh yeah, by the way.
Let's not bury that detail.
Sinclair comes back for a cameo.
A lot going on in this episode. A lot going on, and it's all an unsung hero as well. And again, it's not. I'm not saying that she's better than the other, because the others get so much to do and they're so good in all their scenes. But Delen's got a lot of good little things in this episode. It's not her episode, but there's a lot.
She's pretty much in the background, but she has some reactions that are noticed.
Yeah, I think it's mostly that she's always kind of like sensing G'Kar. Like earlier on when G'Kar's going to try and assassinate someone, she goes to speak to him sensing that something's wrong with him. And then later on, after there's been this mass murder of a lot of Narn, she's the one who reacts the most when he walks in the room. She's the one who's like, G'Kar, would you like to speak? She's very, like, she has her sympathies with G'Kar. And I think in a lot of ways, Delenn kind of represents us in this episode, because probably the dirtiest trick, and I mean this in a good way, that this show's ever pulled, is giving us the most likeable character in Londo and having him be the one who goes down the darkest, sadistic, evil path. And they take G'Kar, who was, when the show began, the obvious villain. He's like, he's always yelling,
he was
he's
always
angry.
like antagonizing and instigating fights, and like just if like he's the one who's like, I can't accept peace. And so yeah, it's easy to be on Londo's side versus G'Kar. But yeah, it's definitely flipped.
And G'Kar even, has tried some shady tactics. He even kind of got some people killed early on in the show. And then in this episode, he's going to assassinate the Centauri Emperor who's visiting. We'll get to that in a minute. But like he's going to go through with this, and the episode flips you so hard with all this, where by the end of the episode, I think we're at the audience. I think we as a unit are like on his side. We are Team G'Kar, and he is now a traumatic like victim in this, and that we're rooting for him to somehow get one over on Londo. But that's the beauty of it, is we still care about Londo, even though, you know, like, now he has to get comeuppance. Now we can't just like have him avoid the dark path anymore. He's on that path. There's no going back. Now the best we can hope for is some sort of atonement, you know, way down the line potentially.
Right.
So all this is
much
going
like
on.
what the Emperor tried to do in this episode. Like, obviously he's responsible for quite a lot of Narn, you know, deaths, but I mean, all he wanted to do was just make amends with the Narn ambassador, and look how much good that did. Like, it gave G'Kar like a complete 180.
Yeah, although not, I mean, I think he was responsible for dumb Narn deaths, but he notably wasn't directly responsible for most of the actual occupation. That was his father, because they mentioned that early on. Sheridan.
Yeah, Sheridan does talk about that.
Because he says, like, he's not even the one that's directly responsible for most of what you're talking about. He came into power afterwards, but you hate him anyway. And, you know, and G'Kar's like, yes, technically that's true, but it doesn't matter. Like, he's still adamant. Yeah. I mean, you can kind of see from, you know, just from Earth history, also human history, like what, people who have been oppressed because of war, or nations that, you know, could have been successful, but because they were in a war that they couldn't win, are now, you know, third world countries and don't have an equal opportunity just because there's peace now. Yeah, no, and I think to extend this point, is G'Kar himself also, I mean, unless Narn live a lot longer than I think they do, this war was, you know, not this war, but this hostile time was 100 years ago. So it's not even like G'Kar was actively involved in those particular events himself either. Right. Nor Londo, for that matter. Like, none of these characters were. This is all history. This is all not ancient history. It's all just a little bit out of reach. It's kind of like World War II to us. It's just a little bit now beyond most of our lifespans. There's some old people still around, yes, but for the most part, it's something that exists a little bit before our time. You know, or a bit. I mean, we're not that old, but, you know, a bit before our time. A couple of generations, but it's also not ancient. It's not when we're talking about the pyramids in Egypt. It's not like that. It's not like so unfathomably long ago that it feels like a almost fictional in terms of it, because it's so long. We still see the fallout of World War II. We still see how the world was shaped in its wake, and, you know, enough time passes, you even see how some of the things that were happening before World War II might be starting to kind of rear, because now it's been long enough that some people are starting to sort of, you know, tap into some of those same ideas and whatever. But yeah, so yeah, because that's the opening scene. It's G'Kar and Sheridan, and he is livid. I think it was the second scene, because the first scene is the Emperor himself on Centauri Prime
with the Prime Minister.
And I love this contrast, actually, because we meet him and he's this kind old man who he talks about how, you know, he wants to go and do this while he's still got time left, because he knows he's at the end of his rope and he's not got much time. But he's this calm, he's very thoughtful, and then it cuts to G'Kar, and and G'Kar's yelling about him like he's this bloodthirsty maniac, and I'm like, we just met him. He seemed like a pretty chill dude, all things considered.
He doesn't even want to wear the wig.
Yeah, that was the thing I think that tells us more than anything, is that he's not. No, that's like all this, you know.
Pomp and circumstance, yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. Like, I'm beyond that. Like, I don't care. Which did answer some questions, is that Centauri can still go bald. Their hair does go grey, because the Prime Minister's still got the big hair, but it's grey. So these things still happen. I mean, not important, but they do. Yeah, I noticed that the wig that he was supposed to wear was a lot more.
It's like a young man's wig.
It wasn't as flat as, like, 'cause you know how like their hair is typically like, sort of like almost like, I've always described it as like sort of sideways mohawk. It's kind of really thinned up. This looked more bushy. It looked more like a almost afro looking wig that we're about to hand him.
Maybe it was for like maybe that's a king's wig.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, you just said it's
maybe
like
the higher your hair, the more noble you are, or something.
You said it's kind of like how like judges in the UK wear their silly.
Yeah, why do you guys still do that?
Ask me, I don't know. I think they're stupid too. What do you want from me? Uh, so there's that wonderful contrast between those two scenes and how opposing they are. And I love that those are our first two scenes, because as the episode goes on, ultimately these are the two characters who are going, even though they never meet directly, they're the two that are going to sort of affect each other the most in some ways. And at least the Emperor's going to affect G'Kar a lot, because G'Kar wants to murder him. He leaves a suicide note, try to like absolve everyone around him of blame, that this is his choice. And he's at this ceremony, he's getting ready, he's going to do his thing, and it just so happens the Emperor starts having health issues. He keels over seemingly with like a heart attack or something to that effect on the way. But there's a couple of notable scenes before that, because he's with Sheridan, and there's a scene where he talks about how he never really had much of his own choices. You know, he talks about how he was born into this role. He grew up, he was always going to be the Emperor because his father was the Emperor, and he was expected to perform these duties, and he's never really felt like he's ever made a choice of his own. And because of that, he's got a lot of regrets. So later on, when it turns out the reason why he really wanted to come to Babylon 5 was to apologize to the Narn representative, to say, hey, like, we're never going to be able to build peace until one of us just sucks it up and says, look, I'm sorry. Like, everything that was done to you was horrible, and we can't pretend that it wasn't. And, you know, you deserve an apology, and hopefully, you know, there can be something that builds from this. And ultimately, Franklin's the one who goes and gives G'Kar this message, which actually, for as dramatic as G'Kar's plot is in this episode, he did pop me with a little joke. Right before Franklin sees him, there's a moment where he's back on the comms talking to another Narn, and he's saying, oh, I almost did it, but the bastard had to, like, you know, keel over. If he just stayed alive a few more minutes. And then when he hears the knock at the door and it's Frank, he's like, oh, maybe this is good news. They only have to prop him up for a few minutes and then I can... And it's the way he said it, it just made me laugh. I love the idea of propping up someone who's almost dead.
I think he calls him indecent for dying before that he had a chance to kill him or something.
There's not a lot of that almost like arrogant Shakespearean G'Kar in this episode, because it is so much more real and dramatic. But that one little bit that came through of him like complaining that he had the indecency to die before he had a chance, I thought was quite funny.
Right, I mean, because G'Kar in the previous scene like had basically spelt out his path. He had three options. Either he was going to kill him and be arrested, kill him or die himself, or not kill him and be arrested for trying. Like, those are the three paths, and only way that he could go forward. So he had already accepted that this would be the end of him. Yeah,
and it leads to that. I mean, it's funny to talk about this scene before we talk about all Londo's side of this, but it's important for G'Kar as well.
This is G'Kar's episode, I think, honestly. Like, I mean, it's a big pivotal one for Londo, but I mean, this is his tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, it could be 50-50. I mean, I'd have to think about it.
I mean, I guess it could be. Like, this is the moment where Londo turns, or he makes the decision to do it, but he's kind of been going down this road. There seems to be a little bit of him, like, being hesitant in the beginning, just because
which I thought
he could tell that he's being manipulated now by both the Centauri government and, you know, Morden, whatever they represent.
Yeah, well, specifically because Veer's uncomfortable, and like Londo kind of shares a moment with him. It's after the other Centauri is there. Reaver, I think his name was.
Riva?
Yeah. He is like talking about all these plans, and it's all very dodgy. Like, because he wants Londo to make this speech against the Emperor and how it's going to get him into a lot of trouble. But this is all about, you know, strategically putting himself in places for the power after he dies. And
yeah, he's like his PR guy.
Yeah, well, I think it's more than that though, because he's very manipulative. Like he's
got like a lot of power.
He's more like an agent who's like taking advantage of the young like actor or star or like pop singer, right? He's more like the seedy agent who's like manipulating them for his own gain, kind of. But of course, like Veer gets uncomfortable, and Londo says, you know, we have that in common. This conversation that we've just had with him about all this, you know, manipulation of the government and putting ourselves in places and like downplaying the wrong people so we've got the advantage later.
Right. I think here he's clearly uncomfortable because he doesn't want to do anything that would hurt other Centauri.
Yeah. And he obviously, Veer is adamant when Londo says, "Hey, we can attack a Narn, base." Veer immediately is like, "No, you can't do this," and he is very adamantly against it. And he tells him to remember this conversation, and he says, "One day I'll remind you of it." And I'm pretty confident that he's going to. I feel like in a season or two's time, we're going to have Veer bring up this conversation when Londo finally looks back with nothing but regret. But he makes this choice, and the attack happens. Before the attack does happen, though, he does have a nightmare, and this is expanding on the prophecy or the dream that he had way back in early season 1, which I know you didn't like at the time. But we know that he sees the end of his days as G'Kar with his hands around his throat.
G'Kar with a makeshift eye patch.
But that's the thing, this expands upon it, because we also see in this extended version, I don't even know if we saw it before, if it was just him telling us about it. But
he just told us about it, yeah.
But we see more of it here, where he literally has become the Emperor, and he's an old man Londo, and G'Kar shows up looking rugged, escape from New York G'Kar, who's out for revenge.
Snake Plissken.
Well, that's what you sort of got the look of. There's also a visual of a hand coming out of a sun. I don't know if you caught that. It's really otherworldly. And obviously some of the shadow shots were in there as well.
Maybe that's Ironheart.
Which could be. Which notably, when Veer afterwards says to him, "Oh, hey, I mean, presumably you want to become Emperor," Londo's like, "Oh, no, I don't want to become Emperor." And it kind of feels like that's Londo's attempt right now to sort of steer himself away from this potential future. Because if he ever becomes Emperor, then maybe this ending that he has with G'Kar will never happen. He's trying to veer it away. No pun intended.
But even in the prophecy, he doesn't seem happy about being Emperor.
No, he looks sad and bitter. He looks like all the choices he's made have left him an unhappy being. And I think seeing the Emperor in this episode and seeing that he is this regretful old man who does want peace and wants things to change is a nice parallel to some of the mistakes that Londo's currently making, even though this Emperor didn't seem to make any specific really bad choices that Londo is currently, but as far as we know anyway, as far as we can tell. But he has this nightmare, the attack happens, the shadow ships kill, at least all the military parts of this, some civilians too. And I think this is one of the notable things. So, is that later when G'Kar finds out about this, he doesn't get angry right away. His first question when he's told about this is, "What about the civilians?" And so if you weren't already on G'Kar's side, the fact that his first concern was, "What about the innocent people? What about the innocent Narn who are there?" It makes you sympathize with him, because as much as he is all sort of, rage and fighter and warrior and whatever against Londo all the time,
assassin,
ultimately, when it boils down to it, the first thought he has is, "Well, what about the people? What about the innocent people who are involved in this?"
Yeah.
But that's skipping over the knife twisting scene, because I think we're upset that Londo's made this choice. We're upset that this is happening, that it's literally already happened. We see the first attack happen, and then Londo's on the main part of Babylon 5, and G'Kar shows up and he's like, "Malari!" And it's a classic Londo and G'Kar scene. And Londo tries
to escape the stairs,
to run.
And there's a blockade of people just trying to get downstairs.
He thinks G'Kar's found out and he's about to get his head ripped off, and G'Kar just goes, "I'm going to get you a drink," and he sits him down, and he basically says, because we kind of glossed over it a little bit, but I actually love G'Kar's reaction. This is probably one of the acting moments you were talking about, is his reaction when Franklin...
He has a lot of just really understated acting also, just his reactions to everything. And I mean, obviously he has a lot of passionate moments, but most of the end of the episode where he's just depressed, and and those scenes are kind of accepting of what's happened, and the weight of all of it just hitting him is really impressive.
Yeah, because he sits Londo down and he says, "Look, I didn't see a lot in Centauri or any hope for you idiots beyond, I thought all you could do was murder and be horrible. But to be honest, if I had a change of heart," and we know why, it's because of this apology that the Centauri Emperor has given him. And he wants to toast in hope for the health of the Emperor, and even Londo's health too, that maybe they can in some way be friends going forward. And obviously, I love this from G'Kar because it's such a progression for him, and it's bittersweet, of course, because we know it's about to be ruined. It's already been ruined. He doesn't know it yet, but Also, from Londo's side of this, I love this look on Londo's face. The performance, I think, I mean, as much as we're praising Jakar, I think Londo's performance in this scene, where he's seeing this and he's been touched by it, but he knows what he's done, and the guilt on his face is wonderful. And it's this scene made me feel horrible in all the best ways, where I want these two, this was Dawn of the Planet of the Apes in a lot of ways, where I'm like, I want these two people I want these two sides to coexist and find peace, and it's too late.
Yeah, they can't.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful
Too
stuff.
much in the way.
Yeah, and Jakar, you know, and I think the episode's smartly written, where Jakar immediately, as soon as he finds out, and you know, he flips the table and snaps his big rock table on his knee and whatever, he immediately just storms. He's going for Londo, and Sheridan predicts this and has got like a you know, an army of security ready, and
of extras who are not allowed to speak.
Yes, but I think Jakar's performance again in this scene, where he's yelling, he's crying, he's like, they're doing it again, they're going to murder us all. They're going to, like, I believed every word he said. Like, there was such passion behind it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and it was I mean, it's really hard just because, especially in this moment, like, it's almost like he's been justified for the way he's been treating the Centauri the entirety of the first season up till now. Like, it's just like, yeah, he was right to be skeptical of their intentions, of their peace.
That's the super sad part about it, though, is that you could look at it as though he's justified, and I suppose in a way he kind of is, but it didn't have to be, though. Like,
no,
that's the thing.
Especially after the turn that just happened, where he was just like, I thought you guys were ruthless, that you didn't have a shred of like, I don't know the words that he used, but like empathy or something like that. But I was wrong. Like, there is something there, and even if it's just a little bit, you know, it's enough to work with, I think. And like, it's a good start. And that was it was such a positive scene.
Keep in mind as well that, imagine that's all. The reason why this is going down is because of interference by the Shadows. If the Shadows never came to Londo, right? Let's just say things played out without their interference, and we get to this same sort of section where the Emperor tries to make this apology. How does this play out if those Shadows never interfered and never...
Yeah, but the Shadows are providing an opportunity. Like, it's still the Centauri government and people who are, you know, really shady behind the scenes that are manipulating it.
Of course. And there's always the risk of that. There's always the wrong people on either side will progress things in the wrong way, right? That's always a possibility.
Yeah.
But I'm saying specifically in this case, if that never happened and it never gave Londo this unbelievable like power to just wipe out like colonies and stuff like that, like, this might have had a chance. Like, this attempt by the Emperor to build a bridge might have worked, and this one bridge working might have been enough, because that's the whole thing with, that's the whole premise of Babylon 5, is that peace is such a fine line, and it's such a tenuous thing that can break at any point if the wrong conflict breaks out. And the whole point of the station is to find a place where they can all kind of try and coexist and keep the peace maintained. So the idea that all it takes is one party to mess it up, and it just escalates from there. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this episode, is that one character in the Emperor has realized the only way to actually start to achieve peace is to be the better person and, you know, say, no, we have to admit past mistakes and we have to go forward and make the right choices. But in the same time, his own people, his own, you know, the youth, not that I consider Londo and the other character are young people, but, you know, because, I mean, Londo's talked about repeatedly that he's too old to dance.
The next generation, though.
Yes. But yes, the generation below him. They are, you know, as he says later on in his dying words, they are damned that they've done this. I think it's beautiful storytelling that shows how Babylon 5 and the way it's juggling its characters, but more importantly its themes, I think has been very impressive. And this episode kind of was a nice junction in that journey. Yeah,
it was really well done. I also just liked some of the aesthetic stuff. I thought the special effects looked pretty good in this one, and I liked I liked all the new uniforms that everybody seemed to have gotten an upgrade on uniforms. They look good.
Yeah. Obviously Sheridan talks Shakara out of killing Londo, because he says, look, you can go and get revenge right now, but you'll be a murderer, we'll have to arrest you, and that's it. Or you can stay in your position and do the best for what you can for your people. So what do you really care about? And he already proved to us that he does care about his people more, because that was his first question, is the civilians, how are they? And
he sort of just lets his rage out on a table instead.
No, he did that already. He just hits the wall.
It's a wall.
But I like that when Sheridan comes back to see him afterwards. Two things I like about this scene. One, I like that he thanks Sheridan for stopping him, because he has cooled down and he's realised where he can do the most good. But two, and this is again a wonderful little detail that they've kept in here, is that he's clutching his Bible, which he made a point of mentioning in his like suicide note earlier on. He said
to give to Na'Toth so that she can be enlightened one day. Yeah,
but so they did a good job of reminding us of it. But I do love that they've made it a very a clear part of his character. In just like 2 or 3 episodes, this is important to him. So I love the idea that at this lowest point that we've ever seen him, after this attack, when he is rightfully furious and he's at maybe the toughest sort of juncture that he's ever had in his entire life, I love that he doesn't mention it. He's just holding it while he's talking to it. And the room's a wreck and he's sitting there quietly. You really get this crisis of consciousness when he's been sitting there just looking for guidance in what he's supposed to do. He doesn't know. And that's kind of the... And Shakara's always so sure of himself that I think the idea that he's like knocked off his like steady footing is like a really kind of like, you get the weight of this, you get the gravitas of what this attack has done to completely shake the status quo of everyone involved. Wonderful. It's not even done. It's not even done, because then Sheridan calls the meeting for them all to come in. And I love the awkward silence as Jakar arrives. Of course, some of this spins out of the Garibaldi plot, where the guest star who's following him, who has been in tons of stuff, Lost, Con Air, Dark Knight Rises, tons of things over there. He's that guy. And the Emperor as well, who I bizarrely knew from the Skateboard Kid too. And yes, I watched that as a kid. I remember, okay?
I know he's in the original series of Star Trek and Next Generation of Star Trek, but I don't really remember his face.
I mean, the original series was like 30 years prior to this, so I don't think you can be blamed for...
Yeah.
That's...
I mean, apparently he's in the Menagerie Part 1 and 2 and The Cage as 2 different characters. And he's in the Reunification 2-parter in Next Gen, but not in the 3rd one in Discovery.
Well, no, Discovery was the last couple of years.
I know. It's a joke. But Reunification Part 3 is in Discovery Season 3.
Yeah, I bet it was much worse than Parts 1 and 2.
What are you trying to do here?
I'm trying to say that Discovery Season 3 went off the deep end a bit.
Are you trying to provoke me for some reason?
No, I'm not trying to provoke anything.
Because I'll fight you.
I'm just saying that Next Generation is a better show than Discovery. That's all I'm saying.
Let's move on.
How is that upset? You must have
an order. I don't
want to
talk about Star Trek.
Okay. But you must have a preference. You must have a ranking of which ones you prefer over the other. Sure, but would you put Dexter?
The rest is a blur.
That came out as a really weird. Would you put Next Generation over Discovery? Of course you would. Why wouldn't you?
Maybe one day I'll make a tier, but I'll keep it secret for now.
Okay.
They certainly have better female characters than Discovery.
You mean on Discovery?
Yes.
You said than Discovery.
No, they have better female characters in Discovery.
Yeah. Well, the way you say like the Next Generation, which is why I was like, oh, I'm going to
edit it out so that I sound better.
No, they're going to think that you think Troy and Beverly Crusher are better than like half the cast of Discovery.
But that's not what I said. That's just what you think you heard.
You said Dan! You definitely said Dan! Alright, we'll move on because Tara's getting mad at me now.
Yep.
So we have a guest star who's following Garibaldi around, and it turns out he's part of a secret army that Sinclair is building from the Minbari homeworld, because as much as he's there to sort of be a bridge from Minbari to Earth, he also has a secret second part of his job, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say is the more important part to him. It's just that the other thing's like a front to Earth. But he's got a secret army, which this guy is, and he's got a message, so we see him on the monitor, a pre-recorded message to ask Garibaldi to basically let his people come and go from Babylon 5 without an issue. Like, just, give them safe passage. Don't ask questions. Just trust me that they're on the good side, kind of thing. And Garibaldi, agrees to all this. He says to the guy, okay, but I want to, whatever you hear, I want to know too. And he tells Sheridan and Ivanova this, but notably does not tell them who the information is coming from, because he promised they wouldn't. So, but they trust Garibaldi enough that they let this go. And this gives them the intel that there is a potential new race that is around, and that they're probably behind these big attacks, which Sheridan uses as ammunition in the scene with Londo, because they're trying to argue that the civilian population that survived the attacks at this Narn base should be allowed, safe passage back to the Narn homeworld or wherever. And Londo's like, no, I'm afraid we can't do that. They're going to be, put into work camps and kind of thing. And, Delen's kind of scolding them on this as well. But then Sheridan basically plays the card of, well, we're going to send some Earth ships to observe how you're treating people, and, they'll maybe find out how you were able to do this attack so quickly. And when he prods at this as if they're going to investigate, Londo backs down and says, "Oh, maybe we can move. As an act of good faith, we'll let the civilians go." But this scene had so much atmosphere because they'd built so much good drama throughout the episode, that G'Kar's entrance, the way that Delenn was kind of like sympathizing with them, Sheridan using tactics to sort of fight with Londo. Like, Londo felt like the dirtiest bastard in the room.
Yeah, I mean, when G'Kar shows up, Londo can physically and turns away, and you can see that he's just embarrassed to even be in the same room as him. You can't look at him.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to the whole it's one thing when you just call a group of people a word like Narn. It's another thing when you're standing in a room with another person who has feelings and is reacting and is impacted by your actions. So it's
he's reminding you of the person you really are.
Yeah. And I think that guilt is something to play with. It really does. This episode really does feel like a culmination of a lot of things that's been building since the start of the show. And when I say culmination, I mean culmination of, I guess, what I'd call Act 1. This feels like we're getting into Act 2 of the story, almost.
Yeah.
And
I have some questions about the about the Sinclair stuff though.
Sure.
Because he mentions the Vorlon, stay close to the Vorlon. So do you think between the season finale and the season premiere, Kosh maybe gave him some information about the shadows?
Possibly.
How else would they know about it unless the Minbari know about it? But Delenn doesn't seem to have any idea what's going on with the shadows. So he has some intel that about the shadows.
Well, I wouldn't say the Minbari don't know anything about the shadows, because Sinclair even says in his video that they believe something's coming. Now, admittedly, how much they know really, this concrete information is open for debate. But it seems like they had, they at least at the very least they have a prophecy or something, like some sort of fear of some big thing coming.
Okay.
Because he did say that in his video.
I mean, there've been some hints of something in previous episodes, but it's always I don't think it's really been around the Minbari. It seems to just be other humans and stuff who have talked about the shadows.
No, that's fair. But we do have connections between Minbari and the Vorlon, though, because we had the whole scene with Delenn at the end of season 1 where she sees what a Vorlon is, so there is some kind of connection there. So it could be whatever he's learned from Kosh is through Delenn, or once he came on board that he did meet with Kosh or something. I don't know. But, I mean, it is very cryptic the way he says it. I don't think we're supposed to know yet exactly what he knows from Kosh or about Kosh or or whatever. It's very cryptic. Because even what he says about the shadows is very cryptic. He doesn't come out and say what he's talking about. He just says, beware the shadows, they move when you're not watching.
Yeah, and he says that he's had people on board the station basically spying for the last 2 months. That's what they've been there for. And they can't trust any kind of government. So it's just been, they're essentially just spies and couriers, like delivering messages.
Yeah, and there's a tease of that at the start of the episode as well, when the guy who comes aboard, the guy at customs says, "Oh, this is the third time you've been here in the last month." So there's a tease of that at the start where it's like, oh yeah, they're coming and going pretty frequently.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's unclear how Sinclair has any information about it, other than like he knows to plant people on Babylon 5 2 months ago, but like how did he know beforehand? Like clearly he was sent to Minbar, if that's the name of the planet. I think it is.
The way I'm taking it thus far is that he's privy to a lot of like classified stuff that the Minbari have on a lot of subjects now, because he's been given, VIP access. I don't know what you call it, but because of this new position, he's privy to a lot more information. And how much of that information that he has now came from what Minbari already had versus what his spies have caught in the last couple months, I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
But he does send a video to Delenn. That's the end of the episode. Delenn getting her message.
Mm-hmm.
Very good, I thought. But
it was sweet.
Obviously, and again, the other thing as well, just to bring Kosh back into this, is that the Emperor, wanted to see a Vorlon before he died, and Kosh does come to see him. So he gets his chance. Which was sweet but also intimidating at the same time, because the message, he's like, how does this end? He's like, fire and death, or something to that effect. It was a very ominous.
It ends in fire or something.
Yeah. It was very ominous, and
I like how every time they talk about the Ambassador Kosh, it's like, will he show up? I don't know. Like he gets invited. Sometimes he shows up. Sometimes he doesn't. Usually he doesn't. We don't really know what he's doing.
I wonder when there's more revealed about Kosh, if we go back and look at the times that he didn't show up, like, is there like a thought process to it where he would always not go there when he knew there was like a certain dispute was going to play out, or something. I don't know. Like, I wonder if there's like a science to the madness.
Yeah. Maybe he's kind of like the Gandalf of the universe, where he's just like he only shows up when he's supposed to.
Maybe.
And he knows, because he has this like other way of looking at the world or the universe.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not that he shows up when he's supposed to, it's that he just knows when he needs to show up, because we've speculated before how much information he seems to already have about what's coming. So, and he knows about the shadows to some extent, because he had that interaction with Morden in season 1. So, yeah. So I mean, the Vorlon mystery is just another thing on top of all the other. This is the great thing about this, is that there's multiple mysteries about, like, okay, the Minbari and what they know, the Vorlons and what they really are, what they look like, what are the shadows exactly. But even without all that, you have this great drama of just the conflict playing out between the Narn and the Centauri, and in particular to represent those two, Londo and G'Kar. And on its own, that's enough for a great TV show. Like, they're back and forth this episode, and the sort of the tragedy of both sides. And I think the one uplifting thing I'll say about this episode, bizarrely, as much as it is G'Kar's tragedy, and obviously it does end sadly with him saying, 2 hours ago, Narn have declared war on the Centauri Republic. There is kind of a slightly uplifting arc for G'Kar in this episode, because he starts off wanting to assassinate someone, and then he is flipped by that person's kindness and wanting forgiveness. Then, of course, by the end of, he's very much, all for the war again. But he does hold off from trying to kill Londo. He is talked down, and he's thankful that he didn't do it. And at the very least, I see that as some sort of growth on his part, where at the end of this episode, I think it's undisputable that right now G'Kar is a better person, for whatever that means, than Londo is. And if he wasn't at the start, because he was trying to assassinate someone, he kind of achieved it through his actions in this episode, as much as he is now at war and he has to, be in that role.
Yeah, much like the Emperor, like, we all believe in redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what he does. Like, he has a change of heart.
Yeah, and I guess it comes back, because I know you hated the dream prophecy way back in like the first or second episode. Like, how do you feel about it now that they're coming back to it and expanding on it, and that they're still keeping it as a narrative like thing to think about?
Well, yeah, I'm glad they haven't forgotten about it or just been like, that's the thing, that it's a prophecy, so it doesn't have to come true. I don't know how I feel about it still. Like, we'll see. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, because they're bringing it back again and they're expanding upon it, I feel confident there's a plan with it, and I do think it'll be about changing it. Like, if nothing else, because I don't see, the show's not going to last until they're that old, so I feel like we have to have some sort of ending before we get there. So I suspect something,
unless the final episode or movie, whatever they do, is like a flash forward.
But I do very much suspect we'll get a Terminator-esque "the future is not set." We can, and that was set up. That was one of the things we said with Signs Importance with the Minbari telepath who predicted the future, which also starred Lord Kiro, yes, Garrett Graham himself, yes, of course. How could I forget? How could I bring up that episode and not mention his name? It was silly of me.
There are rules here to this podcast.
Oh dear. Do you think this was the best episode yet?
Well, it's not my favorite, but yes.
What's your favorite, dog? That's an interesting question then. What's your favorite?
Signs Importance.
Oh.
Why would that be any debate?
I'm sorry, I forgot that it would just be the one with Garrett Graham in it. Do you know what's so funny though? Because that happens to be a really good episode. Is the best episode probably of season 1, maybe, or at least
definitely.
At least top 3 anyway. I do love the idea though. What if Garrett Graham was in like the boxing episode? Would you still say that's your favourite? Just because he's in it?
Absolutely.
Shameful. Absolutely shameful.
He's the best.
Oh man, oh god. All right, well, there you go. This, I would probably say this is the best episode so far. I think the payoff to the Londo G'Kar stuff so far, with their scenes together and each one of their individual reactions to things and their character arcs in this episode, I think were all expertly paid off. And it's one of those things where, you start a show like this and you start it with, oh, it's some fun, there's some stuff happening in the space station, there's some space battles, there's some cool music, and there's whatever. But you get a season and a half into it like this, and this is the sort of episode where, oh, this is going to reward me for paying attention. This is going to pay off stories and have characters who grow, and everything that happens matters, and that's very rewarding as a serialized thing. So it builds trust, and I'm starting to really trust this. I mean, I already kind of did at this point, but like,
you love this show. Shut up.
But after this episode, though, I'm like, oh, you know what? I trust them now. I can't wait to see how something in season 3 pays off on everything we've seen, and in season 4 how that pays off and everything. That's the fun of serialized storytelling when you do end up loving a show. So yes, I do love this show now. Thank you very much. So there we go. That's the coming of Shadows. So we'll see where we go for the rest of the season.
Is it all downhill from here?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the gist of what I've heard is that seasons 2, 3, and 4 are all the greatness, and 5's a bit weaker, but not like disaster levels or anything like that.
Well, 5 was outside of the big plan, though, right? I think that's what I heard.
Yeah, from what I recall, yes, they thought they were going to not get another season, so they wrapped up the main story at the end of season 4, and then they got another season.
The story was so good that they got enough views.
Yes.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it. Like, this episode was great. There's no denying that. And these characters I really like. I really, really like Jakar after this episode. He's kind of the standout for me now. And it's unfortunate that Londo has made the choice he has. And, I can't help but hope for a redemption for him because I like his character too. But I think, how do you come back from this? Like, he's responsible now for, I think they said 250,000 deaths.
Yeah, I mean, no, he can never be a goody two shoes again. The only hope now
he can never be without fault. Yeah.
The only hope now is that he will make the right choice before something even worse is done. That he can stop by by changing his mind, or by speaking up, or letting someone know what's going on, or by acting against the shadows, whatever it may be.
Taking responsibility also for what he's done.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, the hope is that he can prevent something even worse, and that won't make up for what he did, but it'll at least give us like a moment of like, okay, like somehow somewhere at the end of his story, he finally understood what the Emperor was trying to say, and he finally understood like the path that he went down. So that's what you hope. That's what you hope. What will they give it to us? I have no idea. We're so early in the show, though. I mean, if this is going to happen, I don't expect it for seasons at this point. So, I like how bad's things going to get with Londo for the next 2.5 years or whatever it's going to be. I don't know.
We're like a quarter of the way through the show, right?
Something like that. But hey, there you go. That is the Coming of Shadows. Let us know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Absolutely a wonderful episode. So you can like and subscribe. That is the simple and free way to support everything we do. YouTube really loves that like button in the comments and the subscriptions to recommend us out to more people. So please do hit the buttons. Tara is going to tell you about Patreon.
Yeah, if you enjoyed the reviews and following along with us, then please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MildFuzzTV. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you will get access to bonus episodes of other shows we do. And if you pay $5 per month, you will get access to these episodes 1 week early. So you can be ahead of everybody else. And we appreciate it. Thank you.
You can also catch us on the Twitters at @mailed_fuzz for channel updates. And that's about it. So thank you once again for watching or listening. And I'm not surprised this one hit 50 minutes. So you're welcome, everyone. We'll see you next time. Keep watching Babylon 5. And just don't give away the home world.